Welcome to Practical Talk Time. I'm your host, Usha Kumar. I have with me here today Nicole Sabel, counselor and clinical team leader at the Women's Center in Danbury. And she's going to talk about gender images and gender identity. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I want to know how people identify themselves in terms of gender. What do they do?
I think when we hear the term gender, we automatically think of male and female, and that's true. But in terms of talking about gender identity, what has really come to attention in the news and the media is really an idea that there's a difference between who we are on the outside and who we are on the inside. And so gender identity in that respect can mean two different things.
But don't we know our gender right from the time we are children?
Sure. I mean, we've had a lot of medical advances, but there was a time when somebody would say, I'm pregnant, and you'd have to wait to know the gender identity of the child. And nowadays, with medical advances, we can determine that ahead of time. And even still, the first thing a person says is, did you have a boy or a girl? And so on the physical, on the outside, that is one determination, but on the inside, it can be something different.
Even the outside, is it possible that the medical person says, you are having a boy or a girl?
That is true.
Yeah.
The term intersexed can relate to inside having one, what we would think of as
Set of organs.
Exactly, and on the outside having a different one.
I see.
Yeah.
What kind of problem does that cause?
What type of problem does that
Yeah, when
cause?
they have different internal organs of one, organs of one gender and then external organs of another gender.
Well, I couldn't answer that from a medical perspective, but certainly in terms of how we develop our identity from a gender perspective, that can have, that can be a difficult position for a person to be in. It can be a difficult position for the parents of a child in that situation to be in. And how do we talk to our children about that?
As a child, the child wouldn't know because they wouldn't know anything else.
Right. And a lot of times those signs don't show later in life until puberty.
Oh, I see.
So a person wouldn't necessarily be aware of that. And on the other end of it, with the term transgenderism, when a person is transgender, that suggests that physically they present as one gender, but internally the person identifies as another.
Oh, I see.
And so in that respect, that's something that reports of children as early as 3 years old who are starting to able to tell the difference between boys and girls from what we traditionally learn, or saying, I'm learning one thing, but I feel something different.
I see.
Yeah.
So this being the image, we can, what is the explanation for the way people behave when they are one gender or the other?
Right. And so you're talking about gender roles a lot. And there are stereotypes in our society that says men have to behave one way and women have to behave another way.
Yeah, and we started with all the blues and the pink clothing, right?
Right. And we
children's
separate
choice.
it. The second you're born, you get a blue hat or a pink hat, right? And a lot of that is predetermined even before a child's born, and that can be influenced by our culture, by our religion, by our upbringing, by our society. So a lot of factors go into the expectations of what it means to be male versus female.
And now, nowadays we have the television and movies creating also this kind of certain image for a man or a woman.
That's a great point, Usha, that, you know, if you look at your Sunday paper and you look at an advertisement for toys, you see boys, little boys in trucks playing with Tonka trucks or something else, and girls playing with dolls. And so, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that that's not okay, but what if you have a boy who wants to play with a doll or a girl who wants to play with a truck? A lot of times the assumption is that means that the person is gay, right? And which is a whole separate subject, because certainly someone's sexual orientation is different than their gender orientation. But we just put these labels on people. And you know, I think that's why we've now come to a point in our society where there's all different acronyms in terms of what people go by, because I think it's almost a rebellious act or a way of feeling included in society is to say, well, if we're a society that needs labels, then I'm going to create a label that really matches what I can identify with.
But that needs some courage of conviction.
Certainly.
Yeah?
Certainly, I think it's very brave and takes a lot of courage for people to first discover inside who they are and then to vocalize it. I think is very empowering.
And they should not worry about societal restrictions and expectations in terms of...
Well, a lot of the work that we do at the Women's Center is helping to empower people to make decisions that work best for them. And we try to do that by creating a safe, non-judgmental environment where they can really come in and talk about anything and everything, because it is a personal journey at first, and then it's a whole new journey when you're discovering, now how do I live in this world? I've come to a resolution, but what is the rest of the world going to think?
What can parents do when they observe that there's something different in their child? Very often they run to the doctor, right?
Yeah.
But they should be going to organizations like yours to see how they can make things easier for their child in terms of, you know,
yeah, I think the
getting used
best.
to
I think the best thing you can do as a parent is support your child.
Yeah.
I can see how it can be very confusing for some parents, or even scary, because there might be a lack of knowledge there. But the best way you could support your child is to get healthy and correct information and go on the journey together. The child might be just as scared and afraid, and the parents might be scared and afraid for different reasons, and if they work together, that's the best support that each other can provide.
How do they reach your office for help?
At the Women's Center, they can go to our website, which is wcogd.org.
Could you repeat it?
Sure, it's wcogd.org.
Okay.
We also have our office phone number at 203-731-5200. They could even contact our 24-hour hotlines that are for domestic violence and sexual assault, but if they have questions, they can certainly call the hotline.
Okay.
You know, our center also, not only do we provide the counseling for people, but we also make referrals out to other agencies
I see.
that might better be able to serve
What
their
kind of
client.
agencies do you?
For instance, there's an amazing organization called True Colors. It's based out of Hartford, and they're an organization that works directly with LGBTQI youth, and they also provide advocacy work. So they go into the schools, they go work with the Department of Children and Families, they work with schools to help create a safer and more inclusive environment.
Okay. What can you tell us about gender images in general, and what it causes, and how they should be changing their behavior to not cause problems?
Well, you know, I think in terms of gender roles, I think we as a society, as well as men and women, have a certain idea as to what it means. And so I think it creates a situation where men feel they have to behave a certain way, and women feel they have to be a certain way. Men traditionally might be encouraged to be more aggressive, while women are encouraged to be more passive. And when you have the opposite, when you have a woman who's more assertive, she's considered to be aggressive, which is now a negative view in many ways. And the same is true with a man. If he's not aggressive, then he is considered weak. And so it's almost a bit of a hypocrisy. And it sets up a situation where people don't know how to behave. What's right, what's wrong.
Yeah. And what would you advise them to do? What should men learn to do?
I think what men and women should learn to do is to get in touch with what's true for them. You know, whether we're talking about gender identity or we're talking about gender roles, I think it's important for each individual to find what is closest to their core, what is closest to their true beliefs. How can we be most authentic? And I think that's the key to a healthy and happy life, is being as true to yourself as you can be.
Should the men be taught to be a little less aggressive and more understanding, and then the women to be a little more assertive without being aggressive?
I think the true work needs to come from society not having such strict labels and being more accepting of all types of behaviors and all types of identities. I don't think it's specific to men or women. If I encountered an aggressive woman, I would encourage her to be less aggressive and be more assertive. You know, it's interesting, Usha, that we're talking about this because there's 4 ways of expressing yourself. There's aggressive, passive-aggressive, passive, and assertive. And essentially, we'd encourage all people to become more assertive rather than any of the other 3 expressions that I shared.
So everybody can change the way they interact with others, you know, no matter what their gender.
And the reality is the only person we ever have control over in life is ourselves. So if we feel that we want to change and we can change, I believe everyone has the power to do so.
And where do they take the first step? What can they start on a daily basis?
Well, as I said, in terms of being true to yourself, I think it has a lot to do with confronting who we are. And confrontation isn't a bad thing. I think it's a healthy thing if we're looking to improve ourselves. Certainly people who feel victimized are welcome at the Women's Center. You know, we have 3 components to our counseling. We specialize in domestic violence and sexual assault. But we have a 3rd component, which is our resource services, where we really can provide a more generalized form of counseling for people.
This is more like a prevention.
It can be prevention.
So it doesn't escalate to being violence.
Certainly. We don't work with people who are identified abusers, aggressive personalities, but somebody who doesn't feel that they're in an abusive relationship but has low self-esteem.
Oh, I see.
They can come and talk about what they'd like to see different in their life, and we try to help people achieve that.
Okay. We were talking about transgender, right?
Yes.
Do you know of children that are transgender in schools? Have you worked with them?
I personally haven't worked with them, but we're finding as the topic of transgender is getting more attention. I think schools are learning to work with families and the children who are identifying themselves this way. I mentioned earlier True Colors. They're an organization that really helps schools become a safer environment for children of all walks to be a part of.
Because I can see such a child, you know, being bullied by the other kids or teased for some reason.
Yeah. Unfortunately, bullying is very prevalent in our society, and I think especially as adults, we have the responsibility to address the bullying, to confront the issues that we're seeing, and to better prepare our students to not think this is strange or weird, but to be open and welcoming.
We have a lot of celebrity that have come out with their gender images and gender identities. And recently, Chaz Bono has come out with the information.
Right.
Can you say something about that? I mean, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think Chaz Bono has been very brave in his willingness to share his story and share his transition. Most people know Chaz Bono as the Chastity Bono, the daughter of Sonny and Cher. And I think Chaz had a very open and at times heartbreaking journey in life to find his true identity. He initially came out as a lesbian, and that's a common direction people who are transgender go because it's more accepting. We've made a lot of progress in our society, and people are more accepting to gay and lesbian individuals, but transgenderism is still at the bottom. People don't quite get it, and so it's not uncommon that a path would be to come out as gay or lesbian because it's some sort of community. And as people get more and more comfortable, they might then realize, well, if I'm going to really be true to myself, this is the reality. And people are becoming more brave to just go there. So Chaz just did an excellent documentary where he really allowed cameras into his life. And it's great because even his mom talks about the difficulty she had accepting the loss of a daughter and the new idea of having a son.
I see. Especially being a celebrity person such as Cher's child, you know, focus and spotlight is on them all the time, you know, from the time they're babies.
Right.
And I can't imagine how it would have been, you know, trying to be dressed as a girl and being treated as a girl. And then at what stage in his life did he say, okay, enough of this?
You know, as I mentioned, individuals who identify as transgender really have an understanding of it. They might not have the words to articulate it, but have an understanding that something's not right. But especially when a person starts to go through puberty and they look down and they say, what's in here doesn't match what's here. I think that's where they really start to have changes both physically and psychologically.
I see.
And unfortunately, when those individuals don't have outlets and people to support them, then unfortunately depression and other sorts of traits can come into factor because they have to internalize everything.
Yeah, their school life might suffer.
School, social.
So because of that, studies.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. Sure.
And social life
Right.
will be a total mess
Right.
for them.
And I
till
think
they, you know, choose one way or the other to
Right.
be who they really are.
Yeah. And I think as friends and family, it's important to be able to recognize you might not understand what it means to go through what that person's going through, but to see the effects that it's having on someone. As you mentioned, school, grades going down, social life, maybe taking on bad habits such as drugs or alcohol or other negative addictions that are, it's really a person's cry for help.
And the worst thing is they could go into a bad depression with that.
Certainly, yeah, certainly.
Why did the Women's Center, you know, get into this and start taking up this issue?
Well, you know, when we hear the term abuse, people automatically think of physical abuse.
Yeah.
It's the woman wearing sunglasses covering a black eye. It's something you see in a Lifetime movie. And the reality is abuse happens in many forms. And we've talked about bullying today.
Yeah.
Bullying can be a prime example of how just verbal and emotional abuse. In many ways, verbal and emotional abuse is much stronger than physical abuse. You could hit me right now, and I'm sure it would hurt, but that physical pain is eventually going to go away. But if you put me down, if you call me names, if you pick on my identity, I'm going to start to believe that, and that's really going to eat away at who I am. So the Women's Center really tries to address any person and any situation where we see that somebody is in an unjust situation.
And earlier you talked about the sex and gender. Are they the same, one and the same thing, or how does it vary?
Right. Well, gender identity is based on you know, how you perceive yourself. I might physically present as a woman, but internally feel that I'm a man. So gender identity, in the most basic terms, is really how do we present and see ourselves in terms of our biological sex. But when I talk about sexual orientation, that's different because, again, I could, you know, we have people who are attracted to all different walks of life, and you know, again, most commonly people think of same-sex relationships, but there's an array of ways in which people identify themselves.
In our society, why is it important for our society to take a look at this issue and do something positive for this? Why is it important?
I think it's really important because it's who we are as a society. We can't deny that people in our everyday life are these people. You know, we can't turn a blind eye to our neighbor, our friends, our family members, because I think it's great that people are having more courage to be true to who they are and speak up. And if we don't listen to that, then we're denying who we are as people.
And especially where children have the gender identity problems.
Right.
You know, is it important because of those social and other stigmas associated with that? And we need to create awareness among people that it's okay to, you know, that's how they're born.
Right.
And you have to just accept that.
Certainly. I think any time we better educate ourselves, we're in a position of being more open and affirming. When people resist learning something new, then it's really holding them back as an individual and as a society. And you know, whether we're talking about gender, sexual orientation, or a situation a person might be faced with, drugs, alcohol, depression, anything, you know, even positive attributes, if we're not looking at it and addressing it, then we're not really being fair to our world.
I see. As part of the Women's Center, what have you done locally to, you know, regarding this issue?
Locally, we both provide services on an individual basis. If
Who
people
comes to you, like on an individual basis?
You know, I always say I work with people this tall to this tall, of all ages. So I do have a specialized focus in working with teenagers and young adults, but this is an issue that I talk with adults about and young children about. Also, our community education department does a lot of presentations, and the language that they use is very inclusive. So somebody might be, one of our educators might be in a classroom talking, and they're very careful about the words that they use, because if there is that transgendered individual or gay or lesbian individual sitting in the classroom, they don't feel left out of the conversation because we're using language that says, it's okay, you can talk to us. We go to presentations. We were a part of the True Colors Conference this year, which is actually the largest LGBTQI youth conference in the country. 3 of us went and did a presentation on being true to yourself. So we try to get out there and say, you can come to us, it's safe.
You said presentations. What are the places you present? Only in schools, or are there other organizations where you go in?
We go into the schools. We go to, as I said, the True Colors Conference. We work closely with the True Colors Agency, who does a lot of the work in terms of advocacy. So just having and knowing that we can be a resource. I have colleagues from different agencies who know that this is an area that I have knowledge in, so they'll call me for consultations, which is great, because I certainly couldn't do the work alone. But to know, we do trainings in helping other professionals work with this population so that people aren't isolated to one place. They can go anywhere and feel comfortable.
Do you have any people, from the common audience citizenry in the Danbury area or the surrounding areas? Do they just pick up the call and phone and call you at all?
Yeah,
they do that.
Certainly, a lot of our referrals come from word of mouth. A lot of times people are like, Women's Center, what do you do there? And so they'll just call, and that's great. Call. We'd rather you call and ask us how we can help you, because if we can't help you directly, we're going to help you find a place that can get you the help that you need. Yeah,
because the name Women's Center is misleading, because you could be helping boys and girls in this situation.
And that's a good point. We do service men, women, and children. So we actually changed our name a few months ago to say Women's Center with the subtitle Serving Families. And so it really...
So it's not just Women's Center, but
correct.
Women's Centers serving families.
Right. The Women's Center comes from more of our historical context.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
We still have 3 minutes. So, so I would like you to give me some examples of any conversations you've had with families in this situation.
Yeah. Well, again, a lot of times I have had the pleasure of working with families that are trying to be supportive to their children, for instance, or to their friends. And so we'll talk a lot about the importance of language. For instance, somebody who does identify as transgender, it's important to use the correct pronouns, which can be difficult because if you always knew the person as male and now they're transitioning to female, you might naturally want to refer to that person as him. But if now the person's transitioning, it's important to use the pronouns of she or her. So understanding how they can best support each other. We also can work with families in understanding the importance of mourning the loss of their son or their daughter and accepting their new son or daughter. And I'm of course talking about parents, but it can work in any relationship.
Sometimes do they have to change their names?
Oh, certainly. A lot of times people change their name. They change their appearance, and that can be difficult. People usually, if they choose to go on hormone treatment, that's going to change their person's personality to an extent. So it's really letting go of one person and letting in a new.
Yeah, hormonal treatments, I believe, they kind of do a number on all the organs in the body.
Certainly.
It's not just the organs that they're directing it to.
Right, right.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. We could have a whole long discussion about this, Usha.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Tell me if there's anything important you want to say about this.
I think what's really important is that just people be open and accepting. And I think it's really brave of those individuals who have the courage to come out and be true to who they are. And as a society, if we start to recognize that there's different ways of being, then we'll be in a better place to have a peaceful environment.
Are we only doing this in Connecticut, or other states are doing this as well in terms of awareness?
Yeah, other states are doing this. What's great about True Colors is they really are the leading provider, not only in Connecticut, but other states have adopted their protocol of working with public agencies.
Oh, I see.
But as they do that, then other agencies like the Women's Center becomes accustomed and open and affirming as well.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. That was so informative.
Oh, thank you for having me.
so much. And all of you watching, until next time, goodbye.